Welcome to Listening with China Blue. This is a podcast that focuses on how listening not only informs us about what is occurring in the world around us, but also helps us connect with others, build stronger businesses, strengthens our mental health, and become more creative and compassionate individuals. As more and more people practice attentive listening in a community, it becomes a community building practice that strengthens our mental health as we learn from our neighbors. I will be interviewing people from all walks of life to learn how listening has informed them in their field and helped them to make intelligent decisions. They will be artists, musicians, composers, dancers, business people, psychologists, neuroscientists, and Buddhists, to name a few. About me, I'm an internationally exhibiting sound-based artist. In my work, Discovering Unheard Sounds, I realized that the core component that drove my work was simply listening. That realization put me on the path of speaking about and helping people learn to become better listeners. I began with leading sound walks, which I continue to do in the upstate New York region to help people learn to listen from nature. And now, tune your ears to this podcast to learn about the power of listening. And do pay attention until the end for further information on how to start your own listening practice, share it with others, and to support Listening with China Blue. In this episode, I speak with Adam Schartoff of Filmwax Radio. Filmwax is a podcast that features luminaries from the indie film community. His guests include actors, filmmakers, festival programmers, journalists, and just about anyone else with a stake in the game. It captivates listeners because they are treated to an engaging and nuanced conversations from his guests. Hosted by Adam Schartoff, Filmwax Radio began in 2011 and has had thousands of guests over the years, many who have returned over and over again due to his guiding principle of championing independent cinema. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you, China Blue. Thank you very much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here.
Same here.
I'm so excited because I want to talk to you about your interest in indie film and how that began.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to go all the way back to the 19th century. No, not really. I'm just kidding. But I have to go, although it feels like maybe that's when I was born. No, it started with my folks and their love of art house movies. We did not have a lot of art house cinemas. Growing up in Queens, but they would show stuff on PBS, and my parents just, got into all those great European and well, not just European, world filmmakers, including like Ingmar Bergman and Fellini and Kurosawa and all these giants. And so I was curious, and I started watching some of this stuff. I didn't connect with it so much at the time, but it's like laying down a foundation anyway, and it's like it just stays inside of your head, your body, these images, these films, and just that connection. It would be, I'd say, just because of age wise, I came into myself as an independent adult around the time where there was this incredible surge of explosion of independent film.
And that was
So
an
somebody
unusual
in their
time.
20, sorry.
That was definitely an unusual time.
Yes, and it was just amazing. So you had Jim Jarmusch and Spike Lee and Allison Anders, Susan Seidelman, Hal Hartley. I mean, I can go on and on. These people are icons to me. They just created David Lynch.
Yeah.
He's a little older, but he belongs in that company. Um, all these incredible new voices, and I just was there at that time. And at the same time, there was also an explosion, a huge distribution of just European films coming into New York City, where I was living, and the Mike Lees and I can't even get started, but so many wonderful. I especially love those British films, My Beautiful Laundrette and Sammy and Rosie Get Laid, and so many other great films. With Nell and I, that really had an impact on me. It just changed me. I walk into Blue Velvet, I walked out a different person. That
Wow.
kind of thing. So really, that was the sort of second part, and I think the third part is when I was divorced and living in Park Slope with my girlfriend, not being able to find much work at this point in my 40s, but I started a film series at a bar where my friend owned a bar on in Park Slope, and there was a back room, and he just got a projector installed, and I said, "Let's do a film series." I was already really interested in film and figuring out how I where that would play a space in my life in my 40s. Coming from the music industry originally, and I started inviting these filmmakers because there's you can't go to the grocery store without running into a filmmaker in Brooklyn. So it was just like this incredible spot to do it, and they would all come, and I just gained a reputation as being an advocate for independent film there, and then uh, I just got it's such a long story. I'm sorry, uh,
No, no, no.
but there
I'm
was this.
interested in your story. Tell
Yeah,
me
that's true. That's
all
why
the
I'm on.
details, right?
So what happened right around that same time I was doing the film series is there was this new startup called Bebox Radio. It's an internet radio which morphed into also like a podcasting, network. But it was a network, but it started as like an internet radio, and it was the first generation. I was invited to do a radio show and bring on filmmakers and talk to people. So mostly the idea was to make it local and people that I was bringing into my film series, but it quickly just morphed into inviting all sorts of people on. And then, within a year or two, I just realized I don't really need to do the internet radio part. I could just do this uh, podcast version and have a lot more mobility and independence and just build my audience along with, since I had a lot of support from the independent film community, I thought I maybe could make this into some sort of enterprise. Well, I was only partly right, but that's the birth story of Filmwax. It just keep chugging along. You know,
That's so fascinating that, you know, recapturing that period of the 70s when independent film was just on the rise, and that was long before Netflix. Long
hmm
before Netflix. And
well, are you talking about like the period where after the studio, the post Hollywood studio era?
yes.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess you could call aspects of it. I mean, there were still studio produced and distributed films by and large that we were watching, but there was all of a sudden in the 70s, late 70s, a few filmmakers that were acting independently and including like John Cassavetes. I mean, um, a couple of others. There weren't that many, at least not in this country, but by the mid 80s, there was definitely a lot, because equipment became cheaper and more lighter and, things like that.
Well,
And
also,
film schools were proliferating too, which made a big difference
I
too.
was just going to say also, people in high school and college were inspired to go into
That's right.
because of these first filmmakers that had
hmm
hopped onto the scene. Actually, they created a scene. It was
Right.
completely unknown until then.
Right. I loved the fact that, I mean, I never had met John Cassavetes, but I did have on a couple of times John Sayles and eventually almost all the people I mentioned earlier. Like I just, still once in a while I'll get somebody from that era on the podcast, and I'm just like, I cannot tell you how thrilling this is for me to talk to you and to have this interaction with you, what you meant to me and what you mean to me, and to have that. That's a gift of doing this thing, that I've been doing, is just having those experiences of meeting these people that had such an impact on me, telling stories that really, really had a profound impact. That's incredible.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm reflecting on my experience on
Hmm.
on the West Coast, the left coast, where at that time there were many budding filmmakers, and the San Francisco Film
Mm.
School had just barely started out,
Hmm.
and the conversations, like you, the conversations always started out and ended up around the topic of film and what are you making lately? And I would meet people, everywhere, like yourself on the streets or in the flea market that, would be budding filmmakers. Even in my high school, I had friends who wanted to go into film and were planning to do that.
Yeah, the San Francisco, in particular, and the Bay Area, I guess, really had is a what's that word? The incubator, I guess, for a lot of experimental filmmakers. Is a lot came out of that area.
Yeah, yeah. And part of it is because of the schools getting on board, but also a
Hmm.
lot of the filmmakers were already settled in that area, in Marin
Hmm.
County
Hmm.
or in San Francisco. So,
Were you ever tempted to, or maybe you haven't? I'm just not aware. Did you end up doing some filmmaking on your own
oh no,
yourself?
no,
No.
it wasn't of an interest of mine.
It's good to know what you want to do and what you don't want to do.
But it was interesting to meet them and to hear
Hmm.
their stories and hear what they were interested in. And I remember there was one guy in my high school that all the girls were talking about. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Well, he's going to be a filmmaker. He's a catch. And
I'm
that's
sure his fourth or fifth wife thinks so too.
exactly.
Yeah. I thought you were going to say, and that man turned out to be.
Well, that man turned out to be still in indie filmmaking.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I hope for him. Yeah.
Well, it's something, if you have a love for it, then you do it.
Yeah.
So tell us about some of the other luminaries that you have touched bases.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, first of all, there's is so many wonderful stories because also you could go after try to get somebody for years and years, and they resist, or it just doesn't work out, and then all of a sudden, because of whatever period that they're in, I just got this incredible access all of a sudden. That happened with like Susan Seidelman, who made, maybe she's made a bunch of films, but like a couple that were seminal, really, like, well, Desperately Seeking Susan, of course, most notably, but Smithereens before that, and a couple of others that are very worth watching. And I would just wonder, because she's part of that history that I'm so fascinated with, that wave of independent film, back in the day. And but it was very hard to get her on forever. And then she just happened 10 years later, wrote a book,
Hmm.
and because of that, all of a sudden she had a lot of stuff she wanted to talk about, and I just started to see her regularly, and she came on, and I interviewed her for the radio station. The same thing happened with Griffin Dunn and a couple of other people. It's been nice, but I got to be really good friends with Hal Hartley, who made some really like offbeat films back in the day, and he came on a bunch of times. Um, and then, but like in terms of luminaries, um, I right after I moved up to the Hudson Valley, I got Herzog, Werner Herzog.
Whoa.
That was very big for me, very for a person on a personal level, and that was just a remarkable experience. And then more
But
recently, even
hold
go
on,
ahead.
hold
I'm
on.
sorry.
Let
Yeah,
me
yeah, sure, of
interject
course.
because you
Don't
can't
skip.
you can't
Say her.
cruise over Werner Herzog so
I
quickly.
know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you can't.
So what were the salient elements of the conversation?
Um. Well, here's the issue with doing a show like this, where you're relying on publicists, which is something in order to get the kind of guests I would like to have. Sometimes I just and I'm working with publicists, so you are boxed in if you want to spend 2 hours talking to Werner Herzog, you won't even skim the surface of his body of work, right, in his life and all the relationships and experiences. So it was on this more sort of smaller documentary he made, and I got him through that because I had a friend who worked at the Film Forum who liked what I was doing and was very loyal to Film Forum. I still love that place. I still am. I would be happy just to do a Film Forum podcast. But and so I got him on this film on this documentary. So I was kind of had to spend the majority of time talking about that because it just wouldn't, it would be displeasing to the folks that put it together for me just to start going off in all sorts of directions. But on the other hand, we did cover that topic, and he just had was not in a rush that particular um, time, and so he didn't rush me off. But I was very intimidated. I mean, I'm not easily intimidated, but there are occasionally somebody I'll have on, and he's an intimidating, and he doesn't suffer fools, and so he, you know, there were a number of times where he would correct me because it was kind of I highlight those moments because I think they're very enjoyable to watch, and when it'd be no, you're wrong, no, and it was just this to be corrected by Werner Herzog is you know it's a pleasure. Um, so yeah, I mean, and then I was able to share with him that my parents, were he was one of those filmmakers I was telling you about before that they were into, that he was part of the German New Wave, and we made these films like Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, Wrath of God, and made these crazy films with Klaus Kinski, and my parents were fans of it, and so they turned me on to that stuff, and I discovered it, and then years later, I just would rent these films and watch them all, and so he's this credible person in my mind, and then I'm sitting on Zoom on a quiet afternoon talking to him, and it's like intimidating. But he liked he was amused, I think, more than anything else. So hopefully that's the case.
Well, I remember a lot of those films quite well,
Yeah.
and particularly what sticks into my mind is Klaus Kinski's
Mhm.
performances. Now,
Right.
the guy, he seems like he's got to be crazy as
Klaus?
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, no. I mean, absolutely. He was probably mentally ill. I mean,
That was what I was wondering
yeah.
because
I shouldn't diagnose him, but
well, yeah.
the signs are there. Yeah. The, he was on the set of, they were shooting Fitzcarraldo in the Amazon or whatever, and they're in the jungle, and there were real native people from the area that they hired, right, to help crew and help be extras and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the behavior of Klaus Kinski was just so nuts, and he was so violent and so crazy that Werner Herzog was approached by one of the leaders and said, "Do you want us to kill him for you?" They were serious.
Oh my goodness.
No, no.
We're
It's a true
honoring
story.
him.
That's a true story.
Whoa.
Yeah. I urge anybody who is not, yeah, well, no matter what your feelings about film, like, some people really just want to be entertained, and I get it. But if you just want to really have your world rocked, go just, and you haven't seen Fitzcarraldo and Aguirre, watch those two films. I mean, they're long and there's long scenes, but they are gorgeous and they're set in these incredible places, and the costumes and the acting is just unbelievable. And then there's a documentary that Herzog made after years later after Kinski died called My Best Fiend. Not
No.
My Best Friend, but My Best Fiend.
Right,
And
right.
it's all about their relationship. It's a great documentary. It's a great documentary.
Oh, I have to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because using somebody like Klaus Kinski as an actor would take tremendous patience and understanding of what this person will be doing on your set. And basically, he just does himself, he just takes over.
Yeah,
And you have to just let him run with whatever he's going to run with and what he's
you
interested in
can't
at
control
the
them.
very, yeah, very, very moment. But the
Hmm.
fact that Herzog gave him that kind of license
Hmm.
speaks a lot to his vision of how Fitzcarraldo would contribute to the overall look of the film.
Hmm. Those films are the incredible works of art they are because Klaus Kinski, and no matter, you know, one can argue should they've just gotten somebody more responsible in that role, possibly. In fact, um, the original cast for Fitzcarraldo, you know, was not Klaus Kinski, but was Jason Robards, and
Oh my.
Mick Jagger was cast as his sort of sidekick in it, and then. For whatever reason, Jason Rosebar, I can't remember why he left the film, but then they replaced him with Klaus Kinski. I know a lot about this stuff, China Blue. I mean, honestly, it's crazy how much of this stuff stays in my mind. I love the threads though that are created. His Werner Herzog's compatriot in the German New Wave, which was sort of concurrent to the French Nouvelle Vogue, the French New Wave, like Godard and Truffaut and all those Rivette and all those people and Agnes Varda. That was the French New Wave, and then you have it's almost at the same time. Maybe it was a little later. Was the German New Wave, and you have in that group Werner Herzog, and then you have Wim Wenders, and I'm sure you're a fan of. I have a sense you might have seen a few of Wim Wenders films.
Of course.
Like so, the one that kind of broke him in the United States that made him kind of well known was Paris, Texas, right? So who does Wenders cast in Paris, Texas as a female lead? But Nastasia Kinski. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
That
Did
was really.
Klaus visit the set? I don't know. Maybe everybody's
But she
gone.
was also a bigger than life figure, right?
Oh, Nastasia Kinski.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, she started very young. She was very beautiful, right? She was in that Polanski film Tess, right? Um,
Mm.
she was kind of yeah. She had a like a reputation as yeah, very. I don't know. Honestly, I don't. I can't speak on it too fluently because but I think she was somewhat controversial for a while there
Well, I just
as a
think
young actor.
I just think about her from the viewer's vantage point, and
Hmm.
my memory of the film is very very sketchy, but
Hmm.
I remember her as having a sort of sense of bigger than life, really highly dramatic character. Um, but it could also be because she was extremely beautiful.
She was. I mean, and also though, how can you have that father and
That's true.
not be somehow impressed by that? Yeah, a lot of good stuff. A lot of these films are really like big to me. And them vendors went on to do Wings of Desire, which also was huge for me. I went to see that a bunch of times in the theater because I was just so moved by that movie. I loved it so much.
Yeah, I mean it's so wonderful that you got films almost into your DNA.
Yeah. Well, it's the timing. You're just absorbing. You're a sponge at that age. When these things, I was in my 20s and these things are just coming out and I'm just discovering them and they're everywhere in New York City. We had so many of these theaters we could see them in. And there were a lot of revival houses still in the 80s. They would all disappear a few years later, but that was after I already got the virus infection. But then Vin Vendors came on my podcast last year and, that just again, like, it's amazing. That was like, I just couldn't believe it.
What was that like?
Well, that was, he's a little easier in some ways than Werner Herzog, but Werner Hertz, I don't know. But he's also kind of probably done way too many interviews. Probably not very excited that he has to do some podcast. But I came recommended. I have a certain reputation that I've really worked on over the years of just sort of delivering. Although Once in a while, still do drop the ball, but and so fortunately, I had the opportunity to, because my numbers aren't like going to be that competitive anymore. The numbers of people that listen to my show, but they're not like they once were. But he was great. He was very present, and he was open to talking about anything. And I didn't really talk about the films. I just talked about the subject at hand, which were he came out with these two films last year, or actually, I guess technically 2023, a documentary and a feature film. They're both art house films.
And what's the name of the art house film, feature film?
Well, one is Ensemble, which is about this artist. Um, you know, what's his first name? No, that Ensemble is maybe his first name. Kiefer. Do you know this artist? Ensemble. I think he has actually stuff going on at Mass Mocha, but
Hmm.
it's currently closed. It'll be open again in the spring, and he makes these larger scale
Oh,
art.
Ansel Kiefer, the
Yeah,
painter.
Ensemble. Yeah,
Oh, yes, of course.
yeah. So there's a 3D documentary that vendors made about Ensemble Kiefer, which
Oh,
was
wow.
beautiful.
I didn't
Beautiful.
know that was made by Van Vendors.
Yes.
These paintings are mammoth. They cover
Right.
a museum-sized walls, which, are
Yes.
probably
Right.
8, 10 feet tall and 20 feet wide or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah.
I've never seen one in person. I should probably see one or two in person, but from the
I have a feeling
photographs
these are,
that I've
if they're
seen.
not outdoors, they're exposed because they closed it for the winter. But I saw, I was just there a few weeks ago at Mass Mocha, and they're opening that installation up again in the spring. So we should definitely go. If you want to go, we'll get some group together and go, because I
Yeah.
definitely want to return and see that stuff. Love to. Um,
Yeah,
so
and
the new feature that he made in 2023 is called Perfect Days, which is a small story set in Tokyo. Just amazing, but people really love that film. It's a really beautiful story about the winter of your life. It's about death, really, but it's worth seeing. Perfect Days.
hmm.
So you see, you're getting all these recommendations. Who knew we were going to go there? But
Right, right. Was there anything shocking or surprising in your interview with vendors?
no, no, just it's a good question. People can check it out. It's out there. People can go to filmwaxradio.com, but it's also on YouTube. Maybe that one might not be. I wasn't supposed to shoot that one, but or do a video over Zoom, even though you know it was over Zoom, so I have a recording of it. But so but I made a couple of clips out of it, and he's very funny. He can be very droll. We had a couple of good moments. He brought up about how important it is for people, how storytelling is so important. And my partner has a story slam, and she also works with prisoners with stories. She does like workshops in prisons with the prisoners learning how to frame stories about their lives, and it can be very therapeutic, and in addition to being just a creative project, and so he was really fascinated when he heard about that. So I talked a little bit about her and what she was doing. That was fun. It's always better when you're not talking about yourself. I mean, to other third party people. I mean, not
Sure.
like if I'm the host, like you're doing a smashing job because you're getting me to talk, which is not that hard, admittedly, but a good host does share some aspects, because when you do and you talk about your own experience to some degree, it's a catalyst for conversation, but you can go too far, and can make it about yourself. But of course, it's more important to sort of not do that, I guess, which I can be guilty of sometimes on my show.
Well, that's sort of interesting when you're talking about your friends work with people incarcerated. You
Hmm.
must you must hear some incredible stories.
Oh yeah. Yes, exactly. You're true. Not only that, she also teaches. This is two separate things she's doing. One is she works through Bard College, and they have a prison initiative. So she's teaching students, you know, who are working towards their bachelor degree, maximum prison prisoners. And then there's this other thing that they do, which they got a grant for, which is the storytelling workshops in the prison. So, and between those two things, I mean, yes, I mean, and sometimes they overlap, which is really fascinating. So that work is extremely gratifying to her. I'm really like love hearing about that stuff. She'll come home with so many incredible stories all the time.
I think a
These are
lot about that. I think about a lot about the topic of storytelling and how
mhm,
important it is. I It hasn't been something that I've thought about much in my life, but as I get older, I realize that people's stories, every individual person's story, is so important, and it's
mhm,
so important to it's an important contribution to our culture and our society because it gives a little tiny window into that one experience. And that's one of the things that one of the reasons why I decided to start my podcast is to have an opportunity to give people this one chance to talk about their particular viewpoint and how it fits into the overall uh, puzzle of our culture.
mhm, mhm,
And as you have done in your podcast, you've invited people back over and over again.
mm,
And I'm sure that they bring the story forward and add new stories to it. So this kind of developing of individual stories as kind of like a landscape, I think is an interesting to think about in terms of the um, bedrock of our society.
mm. Yeah, well, and sharing stories. Well, first of all, you learn more about. Of course, you learn about yourself in new ways. It can be very therapeutic. It's like a therapy type. And then on the other hand, also you're sharing, and that's a really great thing to do with other people. Sharing your experiences, relating. That makes you. Then you're relating, and then you find common ground, and you feel less isolated, less alone. All these things come out of that.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a glue.
Right. It's absolutely right.
It keeps us together. It helps move culture forward.
Right.
Really important.
And we need that more than ever right now, especially because
I think so.
it ain't coming from anywhere else at this point.
And for for that reason alone, it's important for all of us to move forward on sharing stories.
Right. So everybody should have a podcast. I'm okay with losing 80% of my audience because there's 8 billion other podcasts. When I suppose 2011, there was nobody doing it like so. Um, but it's not. I'm doing it for I do it. I'm glad to know people are listening if they are, but I do it because like you, and what we're just talking about right now. I enjoy the connection, and I love bringing. Thank you for mentioning how I bring people back over and over, because I think that is the most gratifying part of what I do. I just really love having people come back over and over and over.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised, but about when you told me about that.
Hmm.
But then I thought a little bit more about it, and I realized, well, that's kind of interesting because every person has their own timeline, and as time goes by, things of course change, and
Yeah.
they change too with their own time cycle. So
Right.
so you have a different person in front of you, actually.
Well, and because of the nature of the type of thing I do, often it's like a new project.
Of
And there
course.
are some people who come on with, maybe not every project, but with most of the project. They'll keep coming back on, especially if I'm good about following up and going. So, it gives, it's easy because, you have something there in front of us to talk about. And then you can kind of veer off from there. But it's kind of like a helpful thing to have. Okay, this film's coming out. you know, next Friday, and that's what we're gonna kind of mainly talk about. But then there's more going on usually, um, and yeah. So I mentioned Griffin Dunn earlier, and that's a great example. Like, he came out with a memoir this last year,
Mm.
and it's a remarkable conversation we were able to have. He so transparent about his life and everything. I really appreciated him. And now he's going to probably be coming on. He's in a new film, and so I think he's coming back on again.
Oh, nice.
He's been on like half a dozen times.
So
He
you've
doesn't have to do that.
become, you guys have become buddies.
Maybe
Half a
getting
dozen
there. We did
times.
this in this particular case. I did this Q&A with him, or it wasn't a Q&A. Really, it was really conversation at in Great Barrington at the Triplex Cinema, where they had a whole event. They showed a couple of his films. They did a book signing, and then in conversation, and I got that job, and so that was really. I thought it was going to be 20 minutes or so. It was like 45 minutes. Or it was easy to do.
Hmm, nice. So I understand that you are also involved with the Woodstock Film Festival. Can you tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about your involvement there?
Well, I was coming up every year for a bunch of years just to cover it, quote unquote. Like I wanted to look for any excuse to come up to the Catskills or Hudson Valley, but I would podcast from the festival. I would do that from a number of festivals, and that was one of the regular ones. So I started to get to know the executive director over the years. She knew who I was, and that was the extent of our relationship. It was just during the festival. And then when she learned that I moved up here, she kind of just made a point of reaching out to me, which was very nice because I didn't really know a lot of people anyway. So first it was just kind of just what can I do, volunteering, and then I just started to. She really just thought I could be useful to the festival, so I started writing synopses for the films, and then during the festival, for the program and for the website, and then um, during the festival, I would do lots of introductions and Q&As because I have a lot of background doing that stuff. So, uh, and I think there was an idea that I might program events, help get, like do some of the panels or get them together and do all sorts of work like that in preparation for the festival. But the problem is I have a full-time job. So, I just to do the job really well, I just, and I do other things, and I just don't have that kind of. It takes so much work. It really does just to
Oh,
organize and
sure,
produce those things.
sure.
Um, so I'm continuing now. What I'm doing with the festival is I'm starting to screen films that are being submitted, which is not always fun. But so far, its track record's a few years back. I think it was like in the last 2 years or so. Maybe I might have my dates wrong, but they became a qualifying festival. That what that means is that a filmmaker, in order to be qualified for a nomination for an Oscar, for instance,
Mhm.
you have to have a theatrical. The film has to have a theatrical in New York and in LA for like a certain number of screenings over a certain number of days, and they also have to be in a qualifying festival. So there's a bunch. Sundance being obviously one. And there's a bunch of others. One of which now is Woodstock. So all of a sudden their submission level shot up. Now it's
Mm.
like so they desperately need people to screen films, but you also have to have an eye for certain things and recognize and keep in mind all sorts of different things about how a film might work in a festival. So it takes a certain amount of experience and education just to do it, even something like just watch a film and say, yeah, I liked it, or not. But if you promote it, then it goes up to the next level, which is usually the one of the few people that help program the festival itself, and then it'll move on to me watching the in a few months they'll start officially approving films for the 2025 festival, and I will watch a certain number of those, probably quite a few, and write synopses for those. And that will be primarily what I'm doing. I don't see myself really doing a whole lot of other stuff. And frankly, that's good because I put a lot of work into where I work, and I really get a lot about out of that. So, but I love my relationship with the Woodstock Film Festival, and they've got a great team there. And I want to help it just achieve a level of quality that it's already pretty much there, and just because the festivals are very competitive for good quality films. It's very, you know, it's
Oh,
a
I'm
game.
sure that.
Yeah, it's like anything else. It's like, I mean, you're an artist, so galleries are vying for the hot artists and to the best quality art they can get because it's a game. Everybody benefits when you have a great gallery and a great art and you can match them up. Or, I mean, it's no different.
Hmm. Well, that's an interesting behind the scenes view of a film festival.
Oh yeah, it's a lot that goes into doing putting something together, and it's not easy to get films. Like Sundance is going on right now, right? And um, I believe, and there are films that are going to come out of there, and the ones that have like that endorsement, that impression, or win an award, God forbid, are going to be like chased after by so many festivals because that's how they're going to get sell tickets, right?
Sure.
You know, so just think about like that in a festival is trying its hardest to get the great films of the year that are coming out of not only Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, a couple of other Telluride. There's a number of festivals, and they're trying to get these, and in some international festivals, and it's so competitive, and everybody wants to premiere a film, and it's all these politics going on to make a festival work, and it's very easy to put together a film festival. Don't get me wrong. There's thousands and thousands of films out there, but you're gonna have a festival with a lot of questionably quality wise questionable films. It's very easy to get a lot of bad films and poorly made,
Right.
flawed films. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Well, I think that I'm sure that there are many different levels of film festivals too. The
sure.
ones that the you mentioned the ones that are on the top of the heap.
Hmm.
Everybody knows who Sundance is, for example.
Hmm.
But I'm sure that there are other festivals that accept the ones that are not successful for the or not
Or yeah,
designed
yeah.
for
I mean,
Sundance, for example, because
what's that?
Sundance are not designed for Sundance because Sundance
Right.
is looking probably for a particular look or a particular kind of film.
Well, it's also short. Yes, right. Well, yeah, and it's also but to get a film that was that maybe had its world premiere or American U.S. premiere at Sundance, and then I'm running, let's say, the Woodstock Film Festival, and I can get a bunch of those. My festivals can probably do really do do well because they have the shorthand. It's like a brand, right? So, but they do, to their credit, go for, if you want to call them wild cards, unproven films that are maybe someone in the region made, a neighbor, in the Hudson Valley made, and the Woodstock Film Festival or whatever festival recognizes this is a great quality film people should see. It becomes a challenge how to market the film to get the person to get them into the seat in the first place because they don't have the time or they know how to I never heard of this film or this filmmaker or this actor. Why would I, or this documentary? Why would I go see it? I want to go to that one because it's got the Sundance wreath on it. The
The
what
laurels.
have the laurels, right? Exactly. And it's all this. It's the same thing once a film's distributed and it ends up on Netflix or Amazon Prime or one of the people are going to go look at the films that they recognize they've heard about already and take a lot. There's thousands of films that are going to just wallow in you
Well,
know
sure,
yeah,
sure.
that could
Eh,
be as good as any Oscar winning film easily.
Well, given the fact that we now have this five-star system for everything in the world, and if I think like everybody, if you look at something that you might consider, you immediately look to see how many stars it's received.
Hmm.
And so, did it get 5 stars? No, it only got 4.5. Well, maybe, I don't know,
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
I've heard from some people.
Right. And the whole idea behind Filmwax was to become like, you may go to, you meaning one may go to the New York Times or to um, Rotten Tomatoes or may go
Sure.
to their, podcast of choice. But that's what I was trying to, in a way, do with Filmwax, was to be in a way a tastemaker, and to some degree I had some success with that. Arguably, like that, it became a thing. If you listened to the show and you heard me talking to whatever filmmaker, you might right away be inspired to see the film, and that was the idea behind it. You know,
I think that's an excellent idea.
yeah, no, I do too. I just don't.
It's beyond
How
the
effective
star
it ended up
system.
being is, you know, but I also feel strongly that, and I'm talking about 90% plus of the films that have come out that are made. I'm not talking about Hollywood because that's formula in a lot of cases. In a lot of cases, formula stuff that's made for consumerism,
Yeah,
you know. But I'm talking about all these other people that are making films. They don't set out to make a bad film. They make a. It's incredibly difficult and challenging to make a film at all. At
it is.
all.
It is.
Yes, I applaud anybody who pulls it off, and they deserve the respect to have their film watched and considered. I saw just a film the other day that it was like, oh no, this is so, the acting and the script is just, it's just all so mediocre. But I still want them to know that congratulations, you made a film, you actually pulled it together, and it's out there, and you're submitting it to real festivals. And that's the message they should get. Keep going,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
Um, but this one is not going to get into the festival. At the same time, it's not good.
Well,
But
I'm I'm sure young or budding filmmakers, like any other creative endeavor, will fall on their faces more often than not. And that's their process of learning. It's just like, okay, I did it. I did the whole thing from beginning to end. I learned all this stuff that I needed to learn, which is enormous.
mhm, yeah,
and and then they have to, I'm sure that they go back and reflect and realize, well, this needs to be refined, this needs to be changed, I need to improve on all these things. And and that is what goes on through a creative person's life from beginning to end, is you just look back and think about how you can make it better every single time, over and over again.
my my advice for anybody making a feature film, a narrative feature film, or short, a fiction film, is hire. Don't do it if you're not gonna hire actors, real actors. Don't hire your friends, not for any speaking role of any.
Oh, of course.
But what I see is inc- what I saw the other day, in this particular thing I'm thinking about, is these could not be real actors because you know it was just and I'm like, you're doing all this incredible work. Just do yourself the favor, hire real actors. Don't make if you're going to spend it on actors and good quality audio, good quality sound. If you have good actors, a halfway decent script, but really good actors, and you have good sound, people will forgive almost everything else. And for God's sake, keep it under 90 minutes. That's my advice to filmmakers. And I'm
Well,
right.
now, oh,
I've
nowadays
learned
there's
something in
no
the last
tolerance for 3-hour movies.
even visually it could be kind of messy. Editing wise, it's great to have a great editor, of course. But people will forgive a lot if you have good actors, really good actors, and good sound, so they can hear everything.
Yeah.
That's what I think, and that's, I think, pretty good advice. But if you don't have that, then don't make a fiction film. Make something else. Make something personal. Shoot yourself talking. Do talk. Interview your family. Whatever. It's going to be better than getting amateur actors. It's just torture to watch that type of stuff.
Yes.
For
I
me.
No, I agree with you. I remember seeing something like that, which I will not talk about in any depth.
No, no naming names or festival. I've been
No,
to
no, no, no.
festivals. No, no, I'm all about encouraging. That's why I don't. I when I was thinking about this a minute ago, where like when I started and I was doing that film series in Brooklyn, I was also writing reviews because I had these different websites that wanted reviews, and I thought, oh, how cool! I get to go to films, get invited to go to films. I get press credentials, and I get to go to screenings, and I enjoyed that. And then I get to interview, well, not interview actually, but I get to write, I have to write reviews, and I just didn't like it, and I didn't want to write bad reviews for these people we're talking about who actually go into it for to make something good. That's their
Mhm.
intention. It doesn't always come out that way, but they don't go into it to make a bad, they want to make something beautiful. And so I didn't want to be a critic, and there's enough critics out there. So I stopped writing reviews, and that's when I kind of focused more on interviews. Like I thought that's going to be my way into this world. For me.
Yeah. Well, Adam, just wanted to tell you that surprisingly, we've gotten close to the end of our time together.
Oh no.
I know. I know. I'm deliberating as to what's my next question I should ask you. But we have a few minutes to talk about uh, what what does your future look like? What are your future shows or your future plans for Filmwax Radio?
It's a good question. I am attempting and I'm working toward making the podcast. This has been an ongoing goal, and I'm really trying to clamp down on it, but it's to make every episode, getting away from promoting as much as I can, and really, which is just inescapably part of the past of my show, was about promoting your film, promoting your album, promoting whatever project, the festival. And now, what I really would like to do is to really get into deeper into a nuance, that much more into nuance, bring people on for a longer conversation, an hour and under, like what you're doing right now. And it's to really, um, yeah, make more meaningful and focus on projects that are benefiting our culture, that are, that mean something, that will improve people's lives if they watch the films, or, that's really what I would like to keep edging towards that level. you know
Well, that's
I again, I have nothing wrong with entertainment value, and I think that by and large most of everything that I've ever done on the podcast has been of a certain quality. Not everything, but most everything. And I'd like to get to a point though where we're really talking about things that matter, in a right now, especially because of where this country is at. um I think it's super important. So that's my, I don't know if I was clear what I was trying to achieve, but that's where I'd like to. And it's not about not. I mean, I could still have lots of laughs, but I want it to be, you know, I want to get into the real fiber. Not
mm,
fiber, but into the real sort of, into the muck and into the, you know, something meaningful.
well, Adam, that is really interesting, and that's something to think about. And I want to
Hmm.
thank you so much for your time. This has been
Oh,
quite
good.
interesting, and we will talk again, right?
Sure. And we're, I'm so glad to be connected with you, and you know, want to thank Richard for, introducing us. I
Yeah.
think we may have met anyway eventually because of, what you're doing here in the HV and what I do.
Well, yeah, and Richard Human is a good connector for all things. All things.
There's a man who lives the life as an artist, right?
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you again,
thank
and
you.
thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me and being such a great host.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Listening with China Blue. I hope it inspires you to build your own listening practice. This begins as a daily practice of attentively listening without judgment. And ask yourself, what is your version of silence? If you want to learn more about me and my work, go to chinablueart.com and please follow me on Facebook and at Instagram. Thank you.